It's the Rutgers week of the Average Joe Sports Show. I'm Gary Sharp. Is the black shirts showing up on Saturday?
Or is it Uncle Vinny from The Sopranos? We'll see. The boys from Jersey come to town. They look to stay unbeaten.
Hi, it's Bill Doleman. There's something we got to talk about. I just can't tell you what it is, but we'll get to it.
And it's Elijah Herbel here. We'll wrap this show picking Nebraska Rutgers, and we'll talk a couple other games on a otherwise somewhat boring slate of college football. It's the Average Joe Sports Show.
Welcome to it. It's the Average Joe Sports Show midweek edition. That's Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Like and subscribe the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube. Tell a buddy. And, of course, on Twitter at the AJ Sports Pod, Spotify and iTunes. Any Game of Thrones references, Sharpie, since it is the Knights. We never saw a Scarlet Knight in the Game of Thrones, though.
We did not. We did not see anybody named Rutger. If you know anybody named Rutger,
I do.
I'm sure there's a lot of Tony Soprano references that'll be coming our way this weekend. Going to be hot though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How about that? 98.
Well, you guys. Hey, the debate last night, the vice presidential debate, as we record on a Wednesday night, they were talking about climate change. I mean, sideline change.
Well, Shiano mentioned it.
Hey, who would have thought that Matt Rule, when he decided, hey, you know what? I think that game on October 5th against Rutgers is going to be 98 degrees in the sun. Let's go to the other sideline. Well, but don't kid yourself. The weather could play a factor on Saturday because, like, everybody is saying it's going to be baking. Like, it's going to feel like the middle of the summer, and they're going to be in the sun for a while. And I probably think, not trying to steal Ken Dewey's thunder, shout out, it might be like a 25, 30-degree difference from where Nebraska is to where Rutgers is on the sidelines.
It will be. I mean, it's going to be hot and windy, and I think kickoff time will be primed for headaches, enhanced alcohol effects, and sunburns.
Can I ask who
knew that he was going to pick up a Farmer's Almanac when he was recruiting Carter Nelson in Ainsworth, stopping by that outdoor store? What's this book here?
I'm not sure if this is sacrilege or not. Let me ask the question. Has Nebraska ever worn white at Memorial Stadium at home?
No.
I don't think so.
No, and they're not going to.
Is that sacrilege?
I won't allow it.
If you get a playing advantage off of it, is it sacrilege? That's my question.
Ooh, I think the traditionalists wouldn't come back.
If you wore white,
Devaney would come back and stop it.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is Rutgers, their uniform combos are dark red and black, and those sound a lot worse to be in the sun than white. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not saying I'm pushing for it. I'm just saying if Matt Rule's all about having a playing advantage with natural grass surface and moving the sidelines, is that something he'd consider?
Wouldn't be allowed. No, nothing alternative at Memorial Stadium for a Nebraska football home game. I've put my foot down on that.
The only alternative Bill Doleman's for is a REM reunion.
The drumstick.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Henry Rollins and Bill Doleman.
That's right. Yeah, one bourbon, one scotch, one beer with my buddy Ben Boyle and Henry Rollins, circa 1989.
I love it. Mullets, option football, Jerry Godowski, 19 touchdowns, 2 picks.
And no white uniforms.
And no white. No surrender whites.
This feels, I'm just going to throw it out there. This feels like a conversation we have after a ho-hum 28-10 win over Purdue.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. I thought you were going to say a ho-hum 28-10 win over Rutgers.
Ooh, now I think people would take that. I think 28-10. I don't know. Does what you guys have researched about Rutgers and what you've seen from Rutgers and what you've seen from Nebraska, and I think people are like, wow, there's not much of a difference here between these two teams. But then I look at the line, and I know why they set a line to get action on both sides. But it has surprised you that Nebraska is a 7.5-point favorite, and that really has not changed since it came out on Sunday.
I'm amazed. I'm absolutely amazed. Now, our friends in the desert looking at the research they do, they know better than to put a field goal advantage with this football team. So they got to give Nebraska a favorite somehow, but 7 seems high.
I don't know about that.
I think 7 seems high. I think the defense is back on track, and I think Nebraska clearly has a quarterback advantage. But Shiano's a witch at special teams and non-offensive touchdowns. And that's the difference in this thing if Rutgers wins, I think. That and you miss a couple field goals in the red zone.
I think it's high. I thought it was high when it came out, and I actually think it's climbed about a half point, hasn't it? But I agree that Nebraska has an advantage at quarterback, which also is somewhat surprising to think that you've got a guy in Kaliakmanis who has played Nebraska 3 times already in his career.
2-0.
Yeah, 2-0, and this will be 3. And he's been around a long time, played a lot of Big Ten football, and you look at the matchup and think, yeah, the kid that's played 5 games is probably one of the reasons why Nebraska's got an advantage. And look, if it's 4th down and 5, they're going for it, no matter wherever it is on the field. They just don't want to kick field goals. So maybe that's why they're saying it's a 1-score game, but we just know that 1 score with Nebraska is not going to be a field goal, right? And if they win the game 13-10, that means they missed a PAT.
Well, my take on it is the line on its face seems high, but then you dive into some of the way that these teams are constructed, and it starts to make a little bit of sense to me. Like Rutgers defense, to me, when you go back and watch the film, you check the stats, what they are is bend but don't break. They'll let you drive down the field, you get to the 20, and they'll stop you, hold you to a field goal, block a field goal, let you miss a field goal. That's how they play. And Nebraska, to their credit this year, really hasn't had that many issues moving the ball in between the 20s. Which means Nebraska is going to have most likely plenty of red zone opportunities depending on how well Rutgers is able to play keep away with their offense, rushing the football, moving the ball downfield. But, I mean, Nebraska for a half against Illinois had decent containment of the Illinois rushing attack. I think that Illinois is a better quarterback than Rutgers. I don't think Kaliakmanis is as good as what the Illini brought to town. Like, they're a little bit more one-dimensional than Illinois, which Nebraska struggled against the Illinois rushing attack, especially in the second half, don't get me wrong, but you have an offense that's a little bit more one-dimensional from Rutgers, and you have a defense that, I mean, they don't cause havoc. They're not in the backfield all that much. They let teams move the ball on them, and they stiffen up inside the 20s. If Nebraska gets plenty of opportunities, I trust the quarterback that Nebraska has to make some plays in the red zone, especially if he has 4 plays to work with instead of 3. Yeah, is 7.5 maybe a touch high for me? Oh, yeah, but I see it. I see it, and I understand that line. That line makes some sense to me. I'm not saying it should be 2 here, but like 5 or 6 feels a little bit more right, but 7's not out of the question.
This thing's 21-14 ball game, right? I mean, on its face. And what happens with turnovers, what happens with running game, and Rutgers is really, really good at third downs. And they're good at third downs because it's 3rd and 3. A lot of the time. So can Nebraska gear up? They were in the right path. They were doing the right things against Purdue with their running attack. But it's just, you know what? I'm anxious to see this team's mulligan off the tee box here against another phone booth football team, a physical football team. And, you know, the coaches know it's pretty big. And I think we all know it's pretty big with the meat of this schedule right now, even before Ohio State, even before November. I mean, you need to get this thing handled as you go into the bye week from a momentum standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're 5-1, you're 1 win again away from becoming bowl eligible. Then you finally reach the bye week so you can get healed up a little bit, see where Tommy Hill is, and then you go into Indiana, which – you know, Nebraska's about to begin a stretch where the next 4 opponents after Rutgers are all coming off a bye. So, you know, that's another thing to encounter. And then you got to take care of business at home because the weird thing, guys, after Saturday, Nebraska only has 2 home games left.
Yeah.
I mean, they got 4 games on the road, and they're now entering the month of October where I think personally we'll learn more about Nebraska in the month of October than we will in November because of the style. The style of 3 teams, and also remember, you're facing potentially 3 unbeaten teams. So this is a huge month for Nebraska. And to boil it all down, it really is a huge back-to-back with Rutgers and Indiana, because they're, along with you, being called the surprises of the Big Ten so far. And, I think it's a pretender-contender game this weekend in terms of moving up in the tiers of the Big Ten. Is if you think you're for real, you win a football game like this. But the other part, guys, when I look at this, doesn't it feel like this is Groundhog's Day? 2 weeks ago, Nebraska was a touchdown favorite facing a team that was labeled as tough, and Nebraska is going to have to be physical. We'll see what lesson they learned from that Friday night 2 weeks ago.
I think this is a game for the moneymakers, and that's Ty Robinson, Nash Huntmaker, and Jamari Butler. They didn't show up that well against Illinois. That was a game in which, Illinois yards after contact, picking up 7-8 yards, second down and short, and they didn't put a ton of pressure on Altmaier. Going into that game, I think going into the Illinois game, Huntmaker and Robinson both had 6 total tackles each through the first, 3 games of the season, and they didn't have that many in that game. And this is one because everybody talks about the running back with Rutgers, Manangai, right, is the yards after contact. He gets hit after 3 and then picks up 3-4 more and sets up second down and short because of his physicality. This is a game where, to me, if Robinson is going to make the money we think he can make in the NFL and be a first round, first day kind of pick, Huntmaker's not in that category necessarily, but he certainly should be somebody who will be playing on Sundays, and Butler as well. Those guys have to make, especially the 2 tackles, they have got to make contact and wrap and not leave it to John Bullock to be the playmaker defensively that he has been. Nebraska relied on him way too much against Illinois. He had a lot of big plays against Purdue, but to me, this is where Robinson has to have – this is the mulligan game for him, Huntmaker, and Butler. Yeah, you have to make the difference up front, initial contact, against their run game.
This is the redemption game for them. We talked last week on this show, this midweek show, about the embarrassment factor for that Nebraska defense after the Illinois game and the way in which Illinois beat them. Purdue was not the redemption game to say, you know what, that embarrassing performance was not us. You took a step in the right direction against Purdue. It was a good defensive performance, but this is the redemption game. This is the spot where you can show everybody, not just in the Big Ten, but nationally, that, hey, the game plan to beat Nebraska is not come out physical us and run the football down our throats and make it easy on the quarterback. That's not the game plan to beat Nebraska. If you want to change that narrative and get that embarrassment off of your back, this is the redemption spot for you.
It's going to be interesting. It's the Average Joe Sports Show midweek pod. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Like and subscribe on YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show. Follow on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. And Spotify and iTunes can get the audio version, not just the video. It's interesting, dudes, with Nebraska and this redemption theme to see just how, in fact, they can go from last week where it was scoreless and it was what they needed when they needed it. That was Coach Rule's narrative. Well, they'll have another probably one of many opportunities to be in tight ball games. How do they handle themselves at home a second time in front of the 90,000 who are wearing it on their sleeve, yep. The good or the bad with the swings and the momentum of the football game. So, I think they can take that lesson, that scoreless halftime debacle from West Lafayette. And if you're in a similar spot going into the third and fourth quarter, go play like Coach talks about versus getting caught up in the moment. Rutgers, meanwhile, they're confident, they're savvy, and they've made enough plays to win while not playing great football. With Washington, they left 17 points on the field. They should have drilled Virginia Tech. I don't care how bad Virginia Tech is, and they should have beat Miami. You don't go in there and go up 2 scores and then hang on for dear life very often. So they're going to be feeling their oats, so to speak. They're going to be feeling it and not blinking at 3:00 Saturday. Yeah,
they've the one thing about Schiano is they don't hurt themselves. They win close games. That's why, we look at a football game as a 60-minute contest. I'm thinking, man, how important is that first quarter? Rutgers hasn't given up a touchdown, and they haven't scored a touchdown. So maybe go with the under in the first quarter total. But if Nebraska has to chase points, if Rutgers has to chase points, I think that's good because Rutgers has the style where they get a lead and they'll sit on it and they wait for you to make a mistake, i.e. last week against Washington, when Washington wins the time of possession one-sided, 521 yards to, they had like a 300-yard advantage, but Washington was 1 for 4 in terms of field goals, and they had a couple of key plays where they either turned it over or I guess they didn't turn it over, but they couldn't put it into the end zone. I worry that if Rutgers gets a lead, they're going to squeeze the life out of the game, and then it becomes a tension convention. But I think if Nebraska can get up by, a score and a half, then you kind of feel good. I think it's an important game for Nebraska to get off to an early start.
Look, if Nebraska's chasing points, we all know it's got to be chasing 7.
True.
The special teams are an uncomfortable conversation around here, and everybody loves Matt Foley's dad, Ed, and every tavern in Nebraska, every Brunswick lounge, loves the guy. But look, he knows that the special teams are not good, and it's glaring. It's not just missed field goals. A lot has been made about the long snapping. A lot has been made about Buschini being one of the top tacklers on the team, right? I still say Garcia Castaneda is not giving up yards in the punt game, so good on him there. But that's not going to get better in a week. It's one thing to say, okay, Hutmaker and Robinson and Butler, you got to play better, and they got redemption from a subpar performance against Illinois. They look good against Purdue. This is the game they can turn it on for 60 minutes. That special teams thing is glaring, and it's almost like they need that off week to try and figure out a way to master the long snap on field goals and PATs. That's
we're getting Miyagi in for Elvano,
right? That to me is where chasing points in this game comes down to. Everybody's going to be nervous if it's 4th down and 3 like it was at Purdue, or 4th down and 2. Is Harbor going back out there? People will probably be more relieved if 10 goes out there than 30 or 90. And Nebraska can't be in that situation where teams know that, look, they're going to load up. They're going to go for it on 4th down, just like Dan Campbell's coaching them every week.
Well, Nebraska's not allowed a rushing touchdown yet this year.
No.
So that'll be –
how about that? That's
pretty impressive.
Kind of quietly, them and Iowa are the only two college programs that haven't given up a touchdown, FBS programs. We don't really talk about that. That's a big deal. But it's also one other thing about rushing is Nebraska. Go back to the Iowa game last year to find the last time Nebraska gave up a 100-yard rusher. Mm-hmm. Yeah, only one time this year they've given up somebody that's gotten more than 50. You're looking at a guy that 3 of his 4 games he's gone over the century mark, and a team that rushes for nearly 240 a game. I think that's a great statement game for this defense. This plays into their hands of how they'd like to play big boy football. But, I think this is a defensive game. I think this game is predicated on Nebraska's defense. Keep it away from the special teams. My math teacher told me 7's greater than 3. But Nebraska's defense wins this football game if that's the case at 6 o'clock on Saturday.
Well, I definitely think that this is a game, as we talk about the special teams here, where the punting, I think, is going to be huge from Brian Buschini, because I talked about the fact that Rutgers has been bend but don't break. But if you don't trust your field goal kicker, especially on longer distance field goals, pin this Rutgers offense deep and make him go drive the field on you. Because I don't think that's the way that this Rutgers offense is built. Callie McManus, he's a fine quarterback. He's not a drop back, pick you apart type quarterback. He needs to have a solid rushing attack. And I think this prediction from still 72 hours out from this game is that at some point on a 14, 15-ish play drive, which is how Rutgers would have to drive the field, at some point a penalty will rear its ugly head, or a negative rush will rear its ugly head. And now they're behind the sticks, and you got to put it on to Callie McManus. I mean, that's my take, is if Nebraska's on the edge of field goal range, find yourselves in 4th and 4, instead of going for it, pin that Rutgers offense deep, make them drive the field on you and give your offense another chance by trusting your defense in that way. And if it's deep into the red zone, 4th down, you go for it, because if you don't pick it up, hey, Rutgers offense still has to drive the whole field on you. I think that's a game where you truly do play that Iowa field position type battle where you're not taking risks. You're going to go out there and trust your defense somewhat and say, go drive the field in this defense, see how it works for you. And hey, maybe Rutgers offense will have 2 90-plus yard drives in the first quarter, and I'll be eating my crow, but I really don't think that's how they're built.
They can do it once. Can they do it repeatedly?
So when it's 4th down and 2 at the Rutgers 23-yard line, and Rule says, kick it. No. Buschini, we're punting. Punting, from the 23-yard line.
That would be go for it territory for me.
40-mile-per-hour wind you might be kicking into, so it's like knee off the tee box. Go for it.
Yeah. We're not kicking field goals. We're just going to punt it from the 20-yard line. Just see what happens. Just balata ball it, okay?
Well, Dylan Royal talked about blading the old pitching wedge whenever he had the little pooch punt against Colorado. Maybe you have him just go have a little, maybe an 8-iron chip, just nice and low over the line of scrimmage and let it run down.
Hey,
then you get roughed.
Hey, that's why, this is a great chess match between 2 NFL guys. I mean, this also comes down to Schiano and Rule. Yeah. I think Coach Rule in this game, in-game decision-making, but also where can you find the hidden yardage, return yardage, not letting, Rutgers bowling ball get an extra 2 or 3 yards or fall forward for 4. I think this is a fun, in-game coaching matchup between 2 hard-nosed guys that know the impact of what to gain from this game. Because I think if Nebraska wins, guys, I think they're ranked. And I think they go to Bloomington in a game against a fellow ranked team and possibly a game that gets a pregame show off of Fox and maybe a good 11 a.m. kickoff with Gus and Joel if Nebraska wins and if Indiana wins against Northwestern.
Hey, why a pregame show on Fox? Why can't we just get the game day folks down there? When was the last time game day went to Bloomington?
The only thing that would be change my opinion would be if they canceled the Georgia-Texas game.
Oh, is that is that weekend, huh? Yeah.
Well, after Georgia lost on the road, who wants to watch that, right?
You didn't have to do that to him.
Texas is playing a backup quarterback now. There's nothing with that game at all.
I'm taking this on a week-by-week basis. Don't tell me who's playing in 2 weeks. I don't know who's playing.
And the only reason I know that is I looked ahead 2 days ago because I'm thinking, man, is that going to be an 11 a.m. kick? Hoosier hysteria is running wild, and if they're unbeaten, they got 2 weeks to everybody tell the story of Indiana, and Nebraska will just kind of be hanging out over here. And I think ranked. They win this weekend. I think Nebraska's back in the rankings.
And you know what? If that does happen, the scenario going to Indiana will be much like Illinois coming to Nebraska, because Nebraska got all that love after the Colorado game, and you had kind of a pedestrian win over UNI, but Nebraska was the flavor of a week or two, and Illinois is out there. And people are talking about, you beat Eastern Illinois and Kansas and whatnot. But Nebraska got all the attention and all the headlines prior to that game. And Illinois just sat there and took it all in and listened. And then, comes to town and steals a win. Nebraska could be in that Illinois situation where everybody's focusing on Indiana. They're loving all the attention. Nebraska sits back, lets all that happen, goes over there and steals a win.
Schmidt, what are your dogs up to right now? I've seen you over there side-eyeing for the last 90 seconds.
Well, they've been out back. We tend to ditch meth in the backyard.
Wow.
And
this is a highly listened to podcast. Maybe don't say that.
2 of the 3.
No. That's not admissible in court. It's okay.
He said math.
My kid's a wannabe chemist, and he's saving up for an RV.
I'm telling you, this isn't admissible for a search warrant. It's not admissible in court. You can admit whatever you want. It's like, remember the show Moonshiners back in the day?
Talk to the lady.
They have the documentary crew documenting all these moonshiners, and none of that's admissible in court. You're good, Schmidt. You admit whatever you want right now.
The Breaking Bad episode of the Average Joe Sports Show.
You do live in Crime Town, so.
Wow.
South Lincoln. Oof.
Is that kind of like suburban Omaha?
The mean streets of South Lincoln.
2 dogs that end with doodle and a German. Yeah. We're rough and tumble here. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. Enough Wild Kingdom. as can like and subscribe the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. Tell us what you think. Spotify, iTunes, again's the digital. YouTube, where you can watch all of our lovely faces. Sharpie, you nailed the point about the chess match. And, this could be one of those games, too, if you're Matt Rule. You've done a really good job at Nebraska. Folks are excited. You are a growing team. That's wonderful. It's time to grow a few inches and defend home field, because you don't want a second loss on your home field in Lincoln. And on top of that, you also have, some out there that love you if you're Matt Rule, but there's still the kind of whispers of the in-game management. Can you match wits with a guy like Schiano? But if you're Nebraska, you just kind of stack the box and let the Greek freak chuck it around and beat you that way. I mean, Nebraska should be back to meat and potatoes football. They've played so many of these type teams just a year ago with 9 of your 11 starters back. And it shouldn't be an issue with yards per carry in the first quarter, and it definitely shouldn't be an issue with yards per carry in a fourth quarter. That's Rutgers' specialty.
I think if you go back to the Illinois game, if Nebraska stops Illinois' vertical threat, that game looks completely different. They couldn't take that element away. And if they're able to take that away from a quarterback who is smart and efficient, he's a little bit more smart and efficient than he was at Minnesota, but he's not gonna blow the doors off of you. There's going to be a lot of pitch and catch and run after catch. But if you're able to take that away, I think the linebackers will have to have a really good day, and it's good that Javen Wright is getting back into the fold. I think if you take that away and you can focus on Monangai, man, that plays right into the hands of Nebraska. I don't know if I'm giving this vibe off. Rutgers is good, and it's a good story, and Schiano's a good coach, but it almost feels like people are spending too much time looking at 4-0 with Rutgers. I'm looking at last week against Washington, where Washington just left 17 points on the field. Mm-hmm. Should have won that football game. I know there's part of, we just find a way to win. I don't know. Sometimes that catches up to you, and I think it might catch up to Rutgers on Saturday if Nebraska does some of the things that we pointed out, to take away Rutgers' strength. Yeah,
and a lot has been made of Rutgers' top 5 ranking in red zone defense this year. It really helps whenever you play a team the week before that. I believe I have this right. They went 1 for 5 in the red zone on touchdowns. Yep. That helps. That helps those kind of rankings. So keep that in mind. I'm kind of with Gary on this one. I'm not going to go out on a limb here and say I'm super confident in Nebraska's ability, but I think Illinois was a bigger test for Nebraska than this Rutgers team. I think Illinois, the way that they play and the weapons they have on the outside offensively, the balance that they can find offensively, to put it more simply, was a bigger test for this Husker defense. I think if Nebraska goes out there and can match the physicality of Rutgers, which is still a decently sized if, because I don't think Nebraska matched the physicality of Illinois, but if Nebraska can match or exceed that physicality of Rutgers and do it in a disciplined way, there can be penalties, there can be mistakes, but you can't have 100-plus penalty yards. You can't have a ref show in Lincoln on Saturday night. Don't leave this game up to the refs. Play disciplined football, match or exceed the physicality of Rutgers, and I think we should have a happy Sunday morning Average Joe reaction show.
Okay, how about this? I'm not an announcer who does not utter the who avoids saying a no-hitter if there's a no-hitter going on, right? I'm not superstitious like that. But I don't know if we want to talk about a certain term in that if you have possession of the football and you make a mistake and you then give possession to the other team, I'm not going to use the term. But Nebraska's done a nice job of taking care of said football this year, right? the only two interceptions that Dylan Raiola has thrown have been contested and somewhat controversial, could have gone the other way. They've done a good job of holding onto the football with the ball carriers, right? Not too many fumbles. So if Nebraska can continue that pace in which they are not giving the football away to the other team unnecessarily, thus changing possession, that's another thing that Nebraska has done extremely well this year. And I think they're +5 as opposed to last year when it was -17. It's been so good that nobody's talking about it until this very moment, which is why I'm not going to be the one to utter the phrase.
Thank you, Ben McDonald.
Yes. Let us wrap the midweek edition with not mentioning said word. And are we too early for predictions?
No, I think this feels about right. We're going a little bit shorter this week. See how the people feel about a slightly shorter midweek version of the Average Joe Sports Show.
It's gonna mirror the ball game. Home in 2.5 hours. Yep.
Oh no, there's no way. Let's be honest. The TV partners, these games are not under 3 hours no more. I don't care what the style of play is on the field. They're going to get those commercial breaks in.
I got to see it to believe it. 24-21 Rutgers.
Wow.
Nebraska.
They've been kicked off the Average Joe Sports Show.
Nebraska 28-17.
Okay.
I'm not one to give predictions other than pain. But I'll just say I think that Nebraska wins, and I think they do cover, and I actually think they probably cover comfortably. And if every game last year was 13-10, maybe every game this year is supposed to be 28-10.
Okay.
I'll get way too specific with this. I think Monangai gets his offensively. I'm going to go, let's say 23 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown on the ground for Monangai. I think that streak ends. But I think Nebraska has a lead in the fourth quarter. I don't think Rutgers is going to be built to air the ball out late in the fourth quarter. I think Nebraska gets an interception to seal it 28-20.
Okay.
There you
go. We go. Staking a beer bet with all of you.
Did any of us predict any field goals? I don't think we did.
One more time.
Did any of us predict any field goals with our score?
No.
I don't think we did.
No. No. 7 greater than 3.
Chasing 7.
That's the curse of us all being in agreement, though. It's going to be a career game for Hull, and it's going to be 4 of 4 on field goals, and we're all going to
do his Dale Klein.
Dale Klein. I was just going to say that.
Yes.
Before we get out here, any other games
all
in college?
7 of them.
Any other games in college football that strikes anyone's fancy this week?
Bad. Even the rematch of the national championship game isn't getting any love. Michigan and Washington. Yeah. The only game that's like getting a lot of people excited is Texas A&M and Mizzou.
I kind of like Miami and Cal. Have you heard what they've called that game?
Yeah.
I saw a T-shirt.
Woke versus Coke.
Ooh, wow. What's better? Catholics versus convicts or woke versus Coke? Oh, I might be siding with the boys in Berkeley.
I like the Catholics versus convicts still.
All I know is we just keep those Miami folks away from Barney and Shavers and all of that kind of stuff. Let's just keep them in the fold in Lincoln.
Well, speaking of Miami, though, so that game, Miami-Cal, 9:30 p.m. kickoff, I believe that is Central Time. Yes, 9:30 Central Time. And then the 10 o'clock game between Texas Tech and Arizona. You might have some higher scoring after dark games, which could be a lot of fun. And I've said it before. I love the after dark slate, especially as like a broadcaster who spends all day working. I get to come home, kick my feet up, crack open a beer, and watch the after dark slate. It's a good after dark slate.
Is Arizona hosting, or are they on the road?
They're hosting.
And wait a couple of years when college football after dark will be the rivalry between the Pac-12 and the New Mountain West, when Tarleton State takes on Boise in after dark football. When the Mountain West meets the Pac-12.
It's Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt back at you for the Sunday Live Average Joe Pod, reacting to Nebraska Rutgers. Have a good rest of your week. Thanks for tuning in to the Average Joe Sports Show.